Right now, inside your body, a silent process is either building cancer risk or dismantling it, and it is being driven largely by two specific foods most Americans eat without a second thought. 1 in 3 Americans will receive a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. That is not a distant statistic. That is your neighbor, your spouse, possibly you. Here is what 30 years of Nobel Prize winning cancer research at MD Anderson actually reveals. The list of foods you genuinely need to worry about is far shorter than the internet wants you to believe. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly which two foods they are, why the science is so damning, and what you can do about it starting today. My name is Dr. James Allison. I am a professor and chair of the Department of Immunology at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas. In 2018, I was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for the discovery of immune checkpoint blockade therapy, a treatment approach that has put stage 4 melanoma patients with zero remaining options, into full remission. The discovery centered on a protein called CTLA4. Think of CTLA4 as an emergency brake on your immune system's T cells, the special forces units your body deploys to hunt and destroy cancer. When that brake gets stuck, your immune system cannot do its job. My research found a way to release it. Over 30 years at MD Anderson, I have worked with thousands of cancer patients. I remember a 64-year-old retired postal worker from San Antonio. Let's call him Robert. He came to us convinced he had done everything wrong. He had eaten what he thought was a healthy diet for 20 years. He walked daily, but he had been quietly, unknowingly, consuming two things that research now links directly to cancer risk, neither of which his doctor had ever warned him about. What Robert learned changed everything. And today, it could change things for you too. Quick favor before we go deeper into this. A lot of people watch multiple videos here and have not subscribed yet. If this science-based information could help someone you care about, a parent, a spouse, a friend facing a health challenge, subscribing takes 2 seconds and helps this channel reach more people who genuinely need this. It costs you nothing. For someone else, it could mean everything. Most people believe that cancer risk comes from a long, complicated list of dietary villains: sugar, dairy, soy, gluten, red meat, artificial sweeteners. The list never seems to end, and every month the internet adds another item to it. If you have spent any time researching cancer and food online, you have probably felt this way: overwhelmed, confused, and honestly a little afraid to eat anything at all. But here is what nobody tells you, and what the actual peer-reviewed science clearly shows. Of all the foods and beverages regularly consumed in the American diet, major international health organizations have found strong, consistent, reproducible evidence linking only two to a meaningfully increased cancer risk. Only two. The problem is that internet health culture has built an entire economy around fear. More foods to fear means more content to watch, more supplements to sell, more programs to buy. But fear-based eating does not protect you from cancer. What it does is create anxiety, social isolation, and nutritional restriction that can harm your health just as much as the actual risk foods you're trying to avoid. I had a patient, a 58-year-old retired teacher from Ohio. Let's call her Carol. Carol had survived breast cancer and was determined to do everything right. She eliminated red meat entirely. She stopped eating dairy. She gave up soy because she read somewhere it would feed her cancer back. She refused food at family dinners. She turned down birthday cake at her granddaughter's party. And when she came to MD Anderson for her follow-up consultations, she was nutritionally depleted, socially withdrawn, and more anxious than she had ever been. Here is the painful truth. None of the foods Carol eliminated had strong scientific evidence linking them to her cancer risk. Meanwhile, the two foods that do have that evidence, she was still eating them because nobody had clearly explained what those two foods actually were. According to the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is the cancer research arm of the World Health Organization, consuming just 50 grams of processed meat per day increases colorectal cancer risk by approximately 18%. 50 grams is roughly 2 slices of bacon, or 1 deli meat sandwich. The real cause is something happening at the cellular and immunological level that most routine checkups never measure and most nutrition conversations never address: the specific compounds produced when certain foods interact with your body's own chemistry. So if the mountain of internet nutrition advice is built mostly on noise, what does 30 years of Nobel Prize-winning cancer research at MD Anderson actually say is happening inside your body when you eat these two specific foods? That is exactly what we are covering right now. Let me explain what is happening at the cellular level. In plain English, your body is in a constant state of cellular warfare. Every single day, your immune system's T cells are patrolling your body looking for damaged or abnormal cells, including the kinds that could become cancer. Think of your T cells like a highly trained special forces unit. They are disciplined, relentless, and precise. Their mission is to identify enemy cells and eliminate them before they can establish a foothold. Now imagine that every day you are handing those soldiers a slow-acting poison, not enough to drop them immediately, just enough to gradually degrade their performance over time, weaken their surveillance, slow their response. Certain foods do exactly that, not by feeding cancer cells directly, but by generating compounds inside your body that damage your cellular DNA and progressively compromise your immune system's ability to do its job. Dr. Allison's research at MD Anderson has centered on understanding precisely how the immune system is sabotaged and how to restore its power. The dietary connection fits directly into that framework. According to the IARC, which evaluated over 800 studies to reach its conclusions, certain food-derived compounds are so consistently and strongly associated with cancer development that they classify them in the same carcinogen category as tobacco smoke. And one of those compounds is almost certainly in your refrigerator right now. I will tell you exactly what it is and the specific mechanism by which it damages your DNA in just a moment. Which brings us to the two foods themselves and the 6 most important things the research says you can do about them starting today. Solution number 1. Understand what processed meat actually is and eliminate it from your daily routine. Processed meats are not just regular cuts of beef or pork. They are meats that have been transformed through salting, curing, fermentation, smoking, or other processes designed to extend shelf life or enhance flavor. This transformation creates chemical compounds, specifically nitrosamines, that research associates with direct DNA damage in colorectal tissue. When nitrates and nitrites used as preservatives in these meats interact with proteins during digestion, they generate compounds that can attack the structural integrity of your cell's DNA. From Dr. Allison's immunological perspective, this is a double threat. It both damages DNA directly and creates a chronic low-grade inflammatory environment that impairs immune surveillance. In 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer completed a comprehensive review of more than 800 epidemiological studies on processed meat consumption. Their conclusion was unambiguous. Processed meat is a Group 1 carcinogen, meaning there is sufficient evidence in humans that it causes cancer. This places it in the same classification tier as tobacco and asbestos, not because the risk magnitude is identical, but because the evidence quality is equally strong. The specific finding, consuming 50 grams of processed meat daily, roughly 2 strips of bacon or 1 standard deli meat sandwich, is associated with an 18% increase in colorectal cancer risk. The practical step here is not about dramatic restriction. It is about removing processed meats from your daily default. Stop keeping them as a pantry staple. When you need a quick protein, reach for fresh chicken, canned tuna, eggs, or legumes instead. If you want bacon at Sunday brunch a few times a year, enjoy it, but make it the occasional exception, never the daily habit. You can find excellent fresh protein alternatives at Costco, Trader Joe's, or any grocery store. The shift is simpler than most people expect. The research threshold that triggers meaningful risk is 50 grams per day consumed regularly over time. Below that threshold and consumed infrequently, the risk elevation is substantially lower. The clinical target, 0 daily processed meat consumption, with occasional consumption treated as a true exception rather than a routine. Products labeled nitrate-free, uncured, or no added nitrates are a completely safe alternative to conventional processed meats and can be eaten every day without concern. Most nitrate-free processed meats use natural nitrate sources, typically celery juice powder or celery extract, that behave identically to synthetic nitrates once they enter your body. According to the American Cancer Society, these natural nitrate sources still convert to nitrites, and can still generate the same DNA-damaging compounds as their synthetic counterparts. The label reads differently. The biochemistry does not. The honest answer from Dr. Allison's perspective, we do not yet know with certainty exactly which component of processing creates the highest risk. It may be nitrates specifically, or it may be other compounds generated during smoking, curing, or fermentation. What the evidence does clearly show is that processed meat as a category is associated with increased cancer risk, regardless of how the label describes the preservatives used. Now here is where it gets even more interesting, because the second food on this list carries a risk that surprises almost everyone who hears it. Solution number 2, treat alcohol as the carcinogen. It scientifically is stopped for 1 second. Think about how many cancer prevention conversations you have sat through with your doctor, on television, in health magazines, where alcohol was never mentioned, not once. Now consider this. Alcohol is officially classified as a Group 1 human carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the same classification as tobacco, and yet it sits at the center of nearly every social gathering in America, from backyard barbecues to holiday dinners, without a single warning label about cancer. Ethanol, the active compound in all alcoholic beverages, is metabolized in the body into acetaldehyde, a toxic compound that directly damages DNA and interferes with DNA repair mechanisms. This is not a theoretical risk. It is a well-characterized biochemical pathway documented across decades of research. From an immunological standpoint relevant to Dr. Allison's work, alcohol also disrupts the gut microbiome, which houses approximately 70% of your immune system, creating a cascade of immune dysregulation that compromises your body's natural cancer surveillance. According to the National Cancer Institute, regular alcohol consumption is consistently associated with an increased risk of at least 7 distinct cancer types: breast cancer, colorectal cancer, esophageal cancer, liver cancer, and cancers of the mouth, throat, and larynx. Crucially, even light drinking, defined as approximately 1 drink per day, is associated with a measurable increase in breast cancer risk specifically. The NCI data indicates that roughly 1 drink per day is associated with approximately a 9% increase in overall cancer risk, and approximately 3 drinks per week with around a 4% increase. The goal is not to create fear around every social situation. It is to make genuinely informed decisions. Practically, this means exploring non-alcoholic alternatives that allow you to participate fully in social settings. Non-alcoholic wines and beers have improved dramatically in quality over the past 5 years and are now widely available at Whole Foods, Total Wine, and on Amazon. If alcohol is currently a significant part of your stress management routine, that is worth examining, not with judgment, but with the recognition that healthier stress response tools will serve your long-term cancer risk far better. The research does not identify a fully safe threshold for cancer risk. Even 1 drink per day carries a measurable risk increase. For cancer risk reduction, the evidence-supported target is the lowest possible regular consumption, ideally 0 for cancer survivors or anyone with elevated risk factors. Red wine is different from other alcohols. The resveratrol and antioxidants it contains give it protective health properties that offset the cancer risk from alcohol. All alcoholic beverages, including red wine, contain ethanol, and ethanol is the compound driving cancer risk. The NCI is clear on this point. The cancer risk from alcohol is not neutralized by its antioxidant content. Furthermore, every antioxidant found in red wine can be obtained in far greater concentrations from whole foods, grapes, blueberries, pomegranates, dark cherries, without any of the carcinogenic risk. The health halo around red wine has been one of the most damaging myths in nutrition science. Dr. Allison and his colleagues at MD Anderson are direct on this. The glass of red wine with dinner is not a health intervention. It is a carcinogen with a good marketing budget. Now that we have covered the 2 foods with the strongest evidence, I want to spend the next several minutes on something equally important: the foods the internet tells you to fear, that the science says you do not need to. Because the harm from unnecessary dietary restriction is real. And it is something Dr. Allison has seen damage patients' lives directly. Stay with me, because this next section may be the most liberating thing you hear today. But solution number 3 surprised even many researchers when the studies first came in, because it directly contradicts some of the most loudly repeated dietary advice in the cancer survivor community. Solution number 3, stop fearing soy. The science is clear. Soy contains compounds called phytoestrogens, specifically isoflavones, which are plant-based molecules that can bind to estrogen receptors in the body. The fear has been that this binding would behave like human estrogen and stimulate hormone-positive breast cancer growth. But phytoestrogens are not human estrogen. They bind to estrogen receptors differently, and critically, the clinical data shows that this binding does not raise estrogen levels in the human body. Understanding this distinction is essential, and it is the kind of mechanistic nuance that gets lost when health information gets reduced to social media headlines. Research reviewed by the American Institute for Cancer Research finds that consuming soy foods does not increase breast cancer risk. More significantly, the most current evidence suggests that moderate consumption of whole soy foods may actually be associated with a lower risk of breast cancer recurrence, including in women with hormone-positive breast cancer, which is the group most commonly told to avoid soy entirely. The practical application: whole soy foods, edamame, tofu, tempeh, miso, are safe to include in a balanced diet for the vast majority of people, including breast cancer survivors, unless your specific oncologist has given you individualized guidance to the contrary. The foods to approach more cautiously are highly processed soy isolate products, protein powders with concentrated soy isolate, processed soy-based snack bars, where the manufacturing process changes the compound profile significantly. Whole food sources of soy are not in the same category. Research on soy and cancer recurrence risk has generally studied consumption in the range of 1 to 2 servings of whole soy foods per day. One serving is approximately half a cup of edamame, 100 grams of tofu, or 1 cup of soy milk. This is a reasonable, practical daily range, supported by the current evidence. I think of a patient we saw at MD Anderson, a 52-year-old accountant from Chicago. Let's call her Linda. She was 2 years post-treatment for estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer. She had read extensively online about soy and cancer, and she had developed a genuine fear of it. When she visited a Japanese restaurant with her family, a weekly tradition they had shared for 20 years, she sat in front of a bowl of miso soup and felt afraid to drink it. Her family did not understand. She could not fully explain it either. She just knew the internet had told her soy was dangerous. We reviewed her case in detail. We walked through the current evidence together. And when she understood that phytoestrogens in whole soy foods work differently than human estrogen, that the data actually suggested her miso soup was not a threat, but potentially a mild benefit, something visibly shifted in her. She said, "I have been afraid of the wrong things." That is what evidence-based clarity can do. And it is exactly what Dr. Allison believes every patient deserves. This next mechanism, most people have never fully understood it, and it may be the single most liberating piece of information on this entire list. Solution number 4, reframe your relationship with sugar. Fear is not the answer. Here's a question that has been spreading across health forums, cancer survivor groups, and social media for years. If cancer cells love sugar, shouldn't I eliminate sugar completely to starve them? It sounds logical. It is also, according to the Mayo Clinic and the National Cancer Institute, not how cancer biology works. Every single cell in your body, healthy cells, immune cells, brain cells, and yes, cancer cells, uses glucose as a primary energy source. This is not a design flaw. It is fundamental human biology. Eliminating sugar from your diet entirely does not starve cancer cells. Your body will convert other dietary sources, protein, fat, complex carbohydrates, into the glucose it needs to keep all of its cells functioning. Cancer cells will access that converted glucose just as readily. What matters far more than total sugar elimination is blood sugar stability, keeping your insulin response balanced through whole foods, fiber, and overall dietary pattern. Chronic blood sugar instability and obesity are the indirect pathways through which high-sugar diets are associated with increased cancer risk. According to the Mayo Clinic, the popular belief that cutting out sugar will starve cancer is not supported by current scientific evidence. The National Cancer Institute similarly identifies this as a common cancer myth. The actual mechanism of concern is that excess empty calories from high-sugar diets can lead to weight gain and obesity is a confirmed risk factor for several cancer types. The practical shift here is from elimination to quality, whole food sources of natural sugar, fruit, sweet potatoes, whole grains, come packaged with fiber, vitamins, and phytochemicals that support immune function. They are not the enemy. The target for reduction is added sugar in ultra-processed forms, sodas, packaged snacks, candy, sweetened cereals. Not because sugar directly feeds cancer, but because these foods displace more nutritionally valuable options and contribute to the metabolic imbalances that raise cancer risk indirectly. The American Heart Association recommends limiting added sugar to no more than 25 grams per day for women and 36 grams for men as a general health guideline. For cancer risk specifically, the evidence focuses on overall dietary pattern and weight management rather than a precise sugar gram threshold. The goal is a whole food dominant diet, not sugar phobia. A cancer diagnosis or cancer history means you must permanently eliminate all forms of sugar, including fruit, from your diet. Any deviation from this puts you at serious risk. This level of restriction is not supported by the scientific consensus from any major cancer organization. The Mayo Clinic, the NCI, and MD Anderson's own nutrition guidelines do not recommend eliminating whole food sugar sources. Extreme dietary restriction can cause malnutrition, anxiety, social isolation, and deteriorating quality of life, all of which carry their own health consequences. The evidence points to limiting ultra-processed added sugar foods while maintaining a balanced, enjoyable whole food diet. Hold on before you skip ahead. Solution number 5 addresses one of the most confusing categories in cancer nutrition, and getting this right could save you years of unnecessary dietary restriction. Solution number 5, understand the real difference between processed and unprocessed red meat. When most people hear that processed meat is a Group 1 carcinogen, they immediately conclude all meat is dangerous, red meat especially, and so they eliminate steak, ground beef, lamb, and pork from their diet entirely, sometimes replacing it with processed alternatives they believe are safer when they are not. This is a critical misunderstanding that the research does not support. Unprocessed red meat and processed meat are not the same category in the cancer research literature. The processing itself, the salting, curing, smoking, chemical preservation, appears to be a significant part of what generates the cancer-associated risk compounds. A fresh grass-fed beef steak and a package of sodium nitrite-cured deli ham are categorically different products. This distinction matters enormously for the quality of life and nutritional completeness of cancer survivors who have unnecessarily restricted an entire food group based on a misreading of the evidence. The IARC classifies unprocessed red meat as a Group 2A carcinogen, meaning it is probably carcinogenic to humans based on limited evidence. Processed meat is Group 1, meaning it is a known carcinogen based on strong evidence. These are different tiers of evidence with different implications for dietary decision-making. The WHO guidance on this topic specifically clarifies that unprocessed red meat eaten in moderation does not carry the same risk profile as processed meat. The practical guideline, moderate consumption of unprocessed red meat, a few times per week, is not associated with the same strong cancer risk as daily processed meat consumption. Preparation method also matters. High heat charring of red meat does generate some concerning compounds, so methods like baking, slow cooking, or pan-searing at moderate temperatures are preferable to aggressive charring or grilling at extreme heat. Choose fresh over preserved. Cook at moderate temperatures. Treat red meat as a regular but not dominant part of a varied whole food diet. General dietary guidelines from major cancer organizations suggest limiting unprocessed red meat to approximately 3 to 4 servings per week, roughly 12 to 18 ounces total. This is a moderate, flexible guideline, not a prohibition, and applies most meaningfully to those consuming significantly more than this amount currently. What I'm about to show you in solution number 6 is something Dr. Allison's team specifically highlighted because it ties together everything we have covered and gives you the single most powerful daily shift you can make. Solution number 6, build a dietary strategy, not a dietary restriction. Earlier I told you that a specific compound linked to DNA damage is almost certainly in your refrigerator right now. It is nitrosamines, generated when the nitrates and nitrites in processed meats interact with stomach acid during digestion. Now you know exactly what that compound is, where it comes from, and specifically how it damages your immune system's ability to monitor cellular health. Understanding the mechanism gives you the power to act on it precisely, rather than restricting your entire diet out of generalized fear. The most powerful cancer-protective dietary approach is not a list of forbidden foods. It is a coherent, sustainable strategy built around what the evidence actually supports. From an immunological standpoint, what protects you most is a diet that actively supports your immune system's T-cell function, reduces chronic inflammation, supports gut microbiome diversity, and maintains a healthy body weight. That is a positive framework. It is fundamentally different from a list of things you are afraid to eat. Research consistently shows that extreme dietary restriction, eliminating entire food groups without strong evidence, is not associated with improved cancer outcomes and can significantly harm quality of life. The most clinically meaningful dietary changes for cancer risk focus on a small number of specific modifications, primarily eliminating daily processed meat consumption and reducing or eliminating alcohol. Build your plate around what supports immunity and reduces inflammation. Abundant vegetables, whole fruits, legumes, whole grains, healthy fats from olive oil and nuts, and fresh, not processed, protein sources. This dietary pattern naturally crowds out the highest risk foods without requiring the psychological burden of rigid restriction. Meal prep once or twice a week. Keep fresh protein options readily available. Make whole plant foods the default, not the exception. These are small structural changes that compound significantly over months and years. A practical starting target: aim for at least 5 servings of vegetables and fruits per day, 2 or more servings of legumes per week, whole grains as your primary grain source, and olive oil as your primary cooking fat. Eliminate or minimize daily processed meat. Reduce alcohol consumption as much as your circumstances allow, ideally to 0 for cancer survivors. These are not perfect rules. They are evidence-based anchors that give your immune system the environment it needs to do what Dr. Allison's 30 years of research at MD Anderson has shown it is capable of: finding and destroying cancer cells before they become a diagnosis. Here is the Allison Protocol, a complete daily framework built directly from Dr. James Allison's 30 years of immune system research at MD Anderson Cancer Center. This is not a restrictive diet. It is a strategic daily structure designed to give your immune system its best operating environment. Start with a whole food breakfast that stabilizes blood sugar. Aim for protein plus fiber, eggs with vegetables, Greek yogurt with berries, or oatmeal with walnuts and blueberries. This sets your insulin response for the day. Avoid starting your morning with processed breakfast meats, flavored sugary yogurts, or pastries as your primary fuel. Build every meal around a foundation of vegetables and whole plant foods. Make fresh or minimally processed protein your standard: eggs, legumes, fish, fresh chicken, or moderate portions of unprocessed red meat a few times weekly. Eliminate deli meat, sausage, bacon, and hot dogs from your regular rotation entirely. Read ingredient labels. Nitrates appear in many packaged foods that do not obviously read as processed meat. Choose your beverage intentionally. If you currently drink alcohol with dinner, this is where the evidence asks you to make the most impactful shift. Replace with high-quality non-alcoholic alternatives. Sparkling water with citrus, non-alcoholic wine, or herbal tea are all readily available options that allow you to maintain the ritual without the carcinogen. Review your shopping habits once per week. Do processed meats appear in your cart by default, out of habit rather than intention? Replacing them with fresh protein alternatives is a structural change that requires a one-time decision, not daily willpower. Daily processed meat consumption. This single change is supported by the strongest, most consistent evidence in the cancer nutrition research literature. Week 1. You will likely notice your grocery cart and refrigerator looking different. That is the protocol working at the structural level. Weeks 2 to 4, food habits begin to stabilize. The anxiety around eating, common in cancer survivors, often begins to reduce as clarity replaces fear. Week 8. A sustainable, evidence-based dietary rhythm is in place. You are operating from strategy, not fear. Tip 1. In Dr. Allison's clinical experience, The patients who sustain the most meaningful long-term dietary change are the ones who build flexibility into their approach from the beginning. Occasional exceptions, bacon twice a year at brunch, a glass of wine at a milestone celebration, do not erase a year of strategic daily choices. Perfection is not the goal. Consistency is. Tip 2. What the research team at MD Anderson found in practice was that patients who focused on what to add to their diet, more vegetables, more legumes, more whole fruits, were far more successful long-term than patients who focused exclusively on what to eliminate. Abundance is a more sustainable motivator than restriction. Tip 3. In Dr. Allison's clinical experience, social eating environments are the single most overlooked factor in dietary change. Planning ahead for restaurants, family gatherings, and social events, knowing your default choices before you arrive, is more effective than any in-the-moment decision-making. The science on exactly which component of processed meat processing drives the highest cancer risk is still developing. We do not yet have long-term, randomized, controlled trial data specifically isolating nitrates from other processing compounds. What current evidence clearly shows is that processed meat as a category is consistently associated with elevated cancer risk. Dr. Allison's team and researchers worldwide are continuing to investigate the precise mechanisms. Before making significant dietary changes, please consult your physician if you are currently in active cancer treatment, if you are immunocompromised, if you are post-surgery or on a medically supervised diet, if you are pregnant or nursing, or if you have any condition requiring specific nutritional management. This is not a cure. Nothing in this video replaces your medical team's guidance. What this is the best available peer-reviewed evidence, explained honestly, so you can have a more informed and productive conversation with your doctor. This is not a guarantee. Individual results vary based on genetics, overall lifestyle, existing conditions, and many factors we are still studying. What the evidence does support is a meaningful association between processed meat and alcohol consumption and increased cancer risk, and a clear absence of that same evidence for sugar, soy, unprocessed, red meat, dairy, and gluten in moderate consumption. At the beginning of this video, I told you that 30 years of Nobel Prize research at MD Anderson points to a far shorter list of dietary risks than the internet suggests. Now you have seen exactly why. 2 foods, backed by the strongest evidence in the field, and a clear practical path forward that does not require you to be afraid of your plate. If this information could genuinely help someone you love, a parent worried about cancer, a spouse managing a chronic condition, a friend who feels overwhelmed by conflicting health advice, please share this video right now. Cancer will affect 1 in 3 Americans in their lifetime. The Nobel Prize science in this video could change someone's outcome. That is not an exaggeration. That is 30 years of research. In my next video, I am breaking down the 5 foods that most powerfully support your immune system's cancer-fighting ability. Specifically, 1 ancient anti-inflammatory compound that MD Anderson researchers have specifically flagged in their published findings. Most people have it in their kitchen right now and have no idea what it is capable of. Do not miss it. And if you want the Allison Protocol in a complete reference guide, with every study cited, the exact dietary framework laid out clearly, and a printable daily plan, the link is in the description below. I'm Dr. James Allison. Keep trusting the science. I'll see you in the next one.